So when it comes to learning to solo on guitar, one of the most important and often overlooked things is actually learning guitar solos and then analyzing them and seeing what you can take from them. This is something I've talked about on the channel a few times, but it's something I want to delve into a lot more because it is often overlooked and underappreciated. And I think partly because it can be more time consuming, but most things that are effective and good do tend to be more time consuming. Because it's all well and good to learn the scales and individual guitar licks, but when you're learning a solo, you're actually learning them in context and you're learning how other guitar players actually practically use these ideas or these licks that you might have even learned before. And on top of that, you develop a really good ear and you start to recognize certain patterns and stylistic things that certain guitar players do, because they can play the same lick but they play it in a different way, and then you can choose which one you like the most or take different parts from each and then make it your own. And doing this can be really daunting to begin with because you look at a guitar solo and you think, how the hell am I meant to understand what's going on with that? How am I meant to analyze and repurpose these things? So what I'm going to do is take guitar solos that are pretty straightforward theoretically and not too hard to play, and go through and see what kind of pentatonic scale they might be using, what shapes they're using, what key it's in, if they're using any modal notes, and then go over how to repurpose these ideas that the guitar player is using in the solo, which will help give you a framework to work within, so you can analyze guitar solos that you already know or that you want to learn and get the most out of it. And like I said, I do want to make this a more regular thing, so feel free to suggest any solos you would like me to analyze and go over in the comments, and I'll see what I can do. So today we're going to be looking at the solo for Nothing Else Matters by Metallica. It's a really good solo. It's relatively short and uses a lot of familiar pentatonic shapes and whatnot that you might already know, but it has some really cool ideas that we can take away from it. So first off, I'm just going to play the solo so you know how it sounds, and then we'll get into it. So a really cool little lead, and let's get into how to analyze it. So the first thing that's really important when you do this is you have to identify what key it's in. Now a lot of metal and rock is either in the key of A or E for the most part, but it pays to double check, so easiest way is just go on Google for now and just check what key is Nothing Else Matters by Metallica, and you'll find out that the song is in the key of E minor. Not exactly a shock. So I've got the tab up here, and the very first step is I want to break everything down into phrases. So little bite-sized chunks that we can work with. So we're going to do that now. Looking at the very first few bars, we have this. So right off the bat, I would probably divide that into two phrases. So we've got this one over here, and then I would say we have from here to here. So first phrase would be, then the next phrase, then if we keep going, right, so if I were to break that down, I would say, if I zoom in a bit, I'd say from here to maybe over here is a phrase, and then I'd say from here onwards to here is another phrase. And I would consider that the whole first half of the solo. So we have four phrases there. We have this first phrase, then we have next phrase, then the next one, you could even break up that last one a bit more. You could say that there's a little break in the phrase here, so you could break that up into, and then the last bit. I think I like that more actually. So now that we've got our phrases, we want to think back to the key we're in, which I'll actually write up here. So we're in E minor. Okay, excuse my handwriting. And now we want to see, okay, is there any pentatonic shapes or scale shapes that we know that any of these phrases fit into? So if we look at this very first part, okay, my first step is going to be, let's figure out where pattern 1 is in the pentatonic scale in the key of E minor. Okay, so I know an E note is this 12th fret on the E string, and then I'll play shape 1 from there. This is always my starting point when I do this. Okay, shape 1 of the pentatonic scale, and you'll notice, okay, we start off with that 14 and 15, and then we have a 14 and 12. And you can see that all fits into pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale. So now that I know that that first phrase is in pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale, which I'll actually write down underneath it, so we'll just write pattern 1, I can repurpose that lick. Okay, so I know, okay, if it's using the second note on the G in pattern 1, and then the second note on the B in pattern 1, doing this kind of thing, and then that, if I was to solo in, say, the key of B, okay, so all the way down here, and I know my pattern 1's here. Next time I'm playing here, I can think, okay, I remember that little phrase from Nothing Else Matters, and I can repeat it, or repurpose it, and now I have this musical idea. Right, and I can add in other things around it, obviously. Right, if I'm in key, another key, let's say we're in G, so all the way on this 3rd fret, I can, right, because again, it's just in pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale. Cool, so now that's a cool little idea. If I loop something, let's say we're in C now. Turn that down a bit. So I have my pattern 1. Right, and you'll see there that I was kind of doing the next step, which is coming up with variations. So I wasn't just playing the lick note for note in C. I started going off a bit. I started, you know, doing that bend double stop thingy multiple times. Ending on different notes rather than on the 12. Right, and kind of making it my own. So already, just from analyzing that first bit of the solo, I've got a useful little lick that I can repurpose and make my own and use in my own improvising. So let's keep going with this. So now let's look at the next phrase. Quite a cool sound. Now if we just look at it, we can see that it's in a similar place on the fretboard, right? It's similar to all this. It's kind of in that pattern 1 box. However, there is a note outside of that pattern 1 box. This 11th fret here. Okay, that doesn't fit into our pentatonic scale. And this is where people freak out and they go, all right, well, now I'm screwed. There's nothing I can learn from this. No point even trying. But it's okay, don't worry. This 11 here, okay, this note here, and this 11 here, and over here. This is known as a 2 or a 9 if we're thinking scale degrees. And this particular note is pretty much going to work in any context where you're playing in the minor key, which is also any context where you're going to be using the minor pentatonic scale. So what I like to think of is, okay, if I'm in this pattern 1 box here, I can use a note 1 fret behind my first note on the G, and it's going to give me that kind of sound. Because a lot of this is actually just building an intuition and building an ear for certain sounds, certain notes, and then you're going to hear how they will sound in context before you even play them. You'll have an idea of if it fits or not. So this is why you also just got to use this stuff and use it when you're improvising, use it in different contexts. So if we play that lick, apart from the 11, it's all in that minor pentatonic scale. So I'm going to write down here, I'm going to write down pattern 1, and I'm going to write plus 9. Okay, because it's known as the 9, that note, or the 2. I'll write 2 in brackets. Now let's move this around a bit. So if I'm in the key of B, okay, the 7th fret over here, I can, first of all, I just play it note for note there. That's pretty cool. Okay, I'll play some other pentatonic notes around it. Quite a cool phrase. I really like this note here, that extra 9 or the 2. Cool. If we try it in another key, if I try it in G on the 3rd fret. Again, quite nice. Play some other things around it. Quite cool. And if I put on my loop from before, which was in the key of C, and I play it there, so here's my C minor pentatonic. Here's the lick. come up with some variations using the same kind of sequence, the same contour of the melody. Right, ending on that 9 or the 2. Cool, so that's a really nice note to add in there, and that again, as I said, that will work in pretty much any context where you are playing the minor pentatonic scale, so don't fear that note. Just remember, it's 1 fret behind your first note on the G in pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale. Alright, let's move on to the next phrase. So we have this pretty standard rock lick. Alright, you've probably heard that one before, it's a goodie. But again, you can probably see that this is all just in pattern 1. So if I write it here, pattern 1. Cool. So starting off, 12, 14, 12. Then we do this bend on the 14, 12, 12, bend, 12, 12. If I were to switch it to a key like B again, down here. Great, it's going to work. Key of A. Right, it's just in pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale. C. Right, this lick here, you can repeat that as many times as you want. Right, it's always going to sound cool. Now the next phrase is the one starting over here and going to this note over here. So let's play it first and see what's going on with it. So we have... Now right off the bat, you can see this is in the same place on the fretboard as the other ones, so we can kind of guess, alright, it's basically pattern 1. However, we do have this note here, right, which doesn't fit into our pattern 1 box. Right, pattern 1 we would have 14 on the G normally, but we have this 15 over here as well. Now, if you've done a bit of improvising and been looking into scales and pentatonics on YouTube, you've probably come across this note. It's called the blues note. If I were to extend that out for the whole pattern, it's an added note here in the scale. And an added note there. Right, and again, this will work in most contexts where you are using the pentatonic scale, so it is a good one to add in. So again, if I move that to other keys, if we're in B, great. If I'm in A, F sharp. Now to finish it off, we have that last lick of that section, or the first half of the solo, and to play that, we go like this. So over here, we have more double stops, and I would say, again, this is all just pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale. It's all built around that same shape. However, there are notes that don't belong, so like these 13s are obviously a bit weird. These 14s here and here, they don't technically belong to the pentatonic scale, but again, they will work in any context where you are using that. I should correct that. They won't work in any context, but they will work in most contexts where you are just playing the pentatonic scale. So again, because I know it's just in pattern 1, I can move it to the key of B and... Cool. G. A. Right, it's a cool little chromatic. Chromatic just means notes that don't necessarily belong to a scale. It's a cool little chromatic run that you can include when you're playing in pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale. So from that first half of the solo, I have 5 ideas and 5 phrases, 5 licks that I can repurpose and make my own. So I'll put on my jam track in the key of C again, or the loop I had going, and I'll go through and incorporate some of these ideas and just make up a solo. I'm not my best playing, but you get the idea. Now let's keep going with this and look at the second half of the solo. So first I'm just going to break it up into phrases. So we have... I would say there is a good stopping point. So if we go through, got here, say here to here's a phrase, and then here to here. Cool. So this first one, there's a bit going on. So we can see we start off with this 15, which fits nicely into our pattern 1. Right, it's that top note on the E string. And then we have this note here, this 14, which is a bit off, okay? This doesn't fit in the pentatonic scale. However, if you remember back to our 11, when we went, it's actually that same note up an octave. These are both F sharp notes. So it's that same 2 or 9, just up an octave, and this is a great note to play when you are in this pattern 1 box. It's always going to work well. You hear people do it all the time. It's a really sweet note and quite a nice tone. So after that 14, we play this 12, which is the note in the pentatonic, and then we play that 15, 14 again, and then we do a slide from 15 to 17 on the high E. Now what that's doing is, if you think of your pentatonic shapes, so we're in the key of E minor, we have pattern 1 here, and we can see, okay, that 17, that is out of the range of that first pentatonic box. So this here, to figure that out, I would go, okay, how would I go further across on the fretboard? Okay, so if I know pattern 1's here, I know pattern 2 is over here, so I'll play that. And I can see, that 17 is just the top of pattern 2. So we've done a bit of a position shift in the pentatonic scale up to that pattern 2. So if we go to the iPad and I write down, this is all pattern 1, pattern 1. We have these 14s, which are the 9s or 2s. And then we have a slide here, which takes us to pattern 2. I know that's probably impossible to read, but we have pattern 2 there. So just from that, I have this idea of where these 2s are up the octave. That's quite a nice note. And then I can slide up to pattern 2. Right? So if I'm in a key like B, I know my pattern 1's here. I know that nice 9 is there, the 2, and then sliding up. Quite nice. G. Again, going up pattern 1 first. Okay, here's my top note on the E string, which I start with. Then up to pattern 2. And then if we look at that last bit, right, we have this cool little flurry between the 9 and the flat 3, which is a note in the pentatonic scale. Then back to that B note, which is again pentatonic scale. Right, just reusing these same notes, but with a cool kind of rhythm. So for that, I'm just going to write down that it's basically pattern 1 plus the 9 or the 2, however you want to think of it, which again will be really easy to repurpose in any key. So from that next section of the solo, I have 2 ideas that I can use. So if I put on my backing track and C again, I'm going to take those ideas and mess with them a little bit and make them my own. So C minor pentatonic, box 1. Right, I'll zoom in on these so you can see them a bit. So first I have my nice 9 up here. Slide up to pattern 2. Then pretty cool. Now I'll make them my own a bit more. Right, because I'm in pattern 2, I can do some pattern 2 licks up there while I'm at it. So already we've learned so much from the solo. We have like 7 ideas that we can use. Now let's look at this last bit. So we have right, again, same process, break it down into phrases. So we got, I'd say from here, here, maybe to here. Then we could go here to the end. Right, let's go all the way. So only 2 phrases really in this last bit. So we have Right, that's a pretty straightforward lick. Again, it's just in that pattern 1 box, so we can use that. That's always going to work well. In different keys again, B, and G. We got that cool double stop. That's pretty sweet. So I'll just write here, so pattern 1, and you got a double stop. It's a cool little idea. Now the last bit. Right, that's clearly just pattern 1 of the pentatonic scale, so we'll write that. All notes that belong. So what sounds pretty cool from there is going from this lick again, same kind of lick as earlier in the solo, and then doing this bend on the 15, which is the second note on the B string in the pentatonic box. So in other keys, if I'm in B, just that on its own. That's quite a cool phrase on its own, so you could even, if we wanted to, we could make that its own thing there. Alright, that works too. If we try in a different key, G, it's going to work really well. So now I'm going to get that looper going again, and I'm just going to play a few of these ideas that I've learned from the solo, from analyzing it. And you'll see how this can translate to your own lead guitar playing. So hopefully you can see what I was doing there and how I was taking the ideas from that Nothing Else Matters solo and putting it into my own solo, repurposing them. This is how you build musicality and build your lick library in your head and just a whole bunch of musical phrases you can bust out. So I hope this was helpful, and again, let me know if you have any suggestions for solos that I can do this with below, or any ones that you're interested in, and I'll see if I can do it. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.